Mars. A rust-colored world hanging in the void, 225 million kilometers from everything humanity has ever known. For generations, it remained a distant dream, an impossible destination. In our reality, reaching Mars requires 7 months of travel, billions of dollars, and technology that remains experimental. Only robotic explorers have touched its ancient surface. But what if history had unfolded differently? What if traveling to Mars became as routine as catching a bus? What if ordinary people could purchase tickets to another world? This is the story of an alternate humanity. The year is 1995. In a laboratory in Geneva, a team of international physicists achieves what was thought impossible: sustained nuclear fusion with positive energy output. The breakthrough changes everything. Within months, engineers realize fusion propulsion could reduce Mars transit time from 7 months to just 3 weeks. Simultaneously, researchers in Tokyo develop revolutionary electromagnetic radiation shielding, protecting passengers from deadly cosmic rays. These twin discoveries converge into something unprecedented: affordable interplanetary travel. By 1998, the first fusion-powered spacecraft completes unmanned Mars journeys. The cost projections are staggering, under $50,000 per passenger. The world watches in disbelief. What had been science fiction becomes engineering reality. Governments scramble to adapt. Corporations smell opportunity. And millions of ordinary people begin dreaming of red horizons. The barriers humanity believed eternal, the vast distances, the lethal radiation, the prohibitive costs, crumble in less than a decade. Mars transforms from unreachable destination to accessible frontier. The second great age of exploration begins. The new millennium dawns with humanity poised on the edge of its greatest adventure. In boardrooms and living rooms across Earth, a single question dominates: who will be first to claim Mars? March 15, 2003. The passenger vessel Prometheus carries 112 souls toward Mars. Among them, miners, scientists, missionaries, and adventurers seeking fortune on an alien world. They call it the Mars Rush, echoing 1849. But instead of covered wagons crossing prairies, fusion-powered vessels traverse the void. Instead of gold, they seek rare minerals: platinum, iridium, helium-3. The first settlements emerge like metallic flowers blooming from rust-colored soil. Pressure domes rise at Valles Marineris. Mining platforms anchor near Olympus Mons. Each month brings 10,000 new arrivals. Religious communities establish isolated colonies seeking spiritual purity. The Church of New Canaan builds a cathedral dome that catches the first rays of each Martian sunrise. Mars becomes a blank slate for utopian experiments. But frontier life proves brutal. Equipment fails in dust storms. Supply shipments delay. Accidents claim lives in environments that forgive no mistakes. The pioneers learn that dreams require sacrifice. December 3, 2007. In a medical dome at Arcadia Planitia, a child is born. Her name is Aurora Chin, the first human being native to another world. She will never know Earth's heavy gravity. By 2010, 300,000 humans call Mars home. They have built 17 major settlements, established mining operations worth trillions, and begun something unprecedented: a second human civilization. The economic implications arrive like a tidal wave. Martian mines extract rare earth elements in quantities that dwarf Earth's entire reserves. Markets convulse as scarcity gives way to sudden abundance. Platinum prices crash 70% in 18 months. The traditional mining giants of Earth face extinction. Meanwhile, Martian prospectors who staked early claims become billionaires overnight. A new aristocracy emerges. Low Martian gravity proves perfect for manufacturing delicate electronics and pharmaceutical compounds. Factories spring up, producing goods impossible to create under Earth's oppressive pull. Two-planet capitalism transforms industrial production forever. Earth's developing nations find unexpected opportunity. Traditional colonial patterns invert as African and Asian conglomerates purchase bankrupt Western mining companies. The old economic order crumbles under the weight of interplanetary commerce. New billionaires emerge from the Martian frontier, entrepreneurs who gambled everything on the red planet's promise. They build fortunes that dwarf Earth's wealthiest dynasties within mere years. But this new wealth comes at terrible cost. Traditional mining communities across Earth fall silent. Steel towns rust. Coal regions become ghost settlements as Martian imports render them obsolete. Unemployment protests erupt across 3 continents. Workers demand protection from Martian competition. Politicians face impossible choices between progress and their devastated constituents. As economic transformation reshapes both worlds, a deeper question emerges: who governs Mars? The United Nations convenes an emergency session to establish the first interplanetary legal framework. Earth's great powers collide over Martian territory. The United States claims the Valles Marineris region. China establishes authority over the northern plains. Russia demands its share. But the colonists themselves reject this distant authority. They carve out lives in the Martian dust with their own hands. Why should Earth's politicians dictate their future? In 2012, the Martian Colonial Assembly forms, an unauthorized parliament representing 17 major settlements. Earth's governments condemn it as illegal. The colonists simply ignore them. The independence movement finds its voice through Helena Okonkwo, a Nigerian-born engineer who arrived on the third commercial flight. Her speeches broadcast across both worlds inspire millions. Earth's response proves clumsy. Military threats ring hollow across 225 million kilometers. Economic sanctions hurt Earth corporations more than stubborn Martian settlements. By 2015, a fragile compromise emerges. Mars gains limited autonomy under a United Nations protectorate system. But everyone knows this arrangement cannot last forever. Despite political tensions, the human tide flows ever Marsward. By 2018, departure terminals process 10,000 passengers daily. Families sell everything for one-way tickets to new beginnings. Climate refugees lead the exodus. As rising seas swallow Pacific islands and droughts devastate equatorial regions, Mars offers what Earth no longer can, the promise of survival. Political dissidents find sanctuary on the red frontier. Journalists silenced on Earth publish freely from Martian servers. Activists build movements beyond the reach of authoritarian governments. Some nations encourage emigration, viewing Mars as relief from overpopulation pressures. Others panic as their brightest citizens abandon homeland for Martian opportunity. Brain drain becomes a crisis. By 2020, 50 million humans breathe Martian air. Cities rise from red dust. A second human world takes shape, chaotic, hopeful, utterly unlike anything Earth has ever seen. But emigration creates its own problems. Martian settlements strain under unexpected population growth. Housing shortages spark riots. Resource allocation becomes the defining political challenge. Something unexpected happens to children born on Mars. In the planet's weaker gravity, they grow taller, their bones lighter, their movements fluid in ways Earth-born humans find unsettling. These first-generation Martians develop their own accent, a melodic blend of Earth languages shaped by dome acoustics. They speak of downworlders with subtle condescension. A cultural divide emerges. Martian artists create forms impossible on Earth. Sculptors work in materials that would collapse under terrestrial gravity. Musicians compose for acoustic environments found nowhere in nature. A new identity crystallizes. They call themselves Reds, proud inhabitants of the Crimson World. Earth becomes the old planet, spoken of with diminishing reverence by those who never walked there. By 2020, Martian children develop a distinct physicality. Growing in 38% gravity, they stand taller, their bones elongated, their movements graceful yet unsettling to Earth visitors. These Reds, as Earth media calls them, cannot safely visit their ancestral homeworld. Earth's crushing gravity would strain their hearts, compress their spines, confine them to wheelchairs. A generation emerges that has never breathed unfiltered air, never felt rain, never seen blue sky without domed glass. Earth becomes mythology, beautiful but fundamentally alien. Language itself begins diverging. Martian dialects incorporate technical vocabulary, new slang, rhythms shaped by life in enclosed spaces. Earth idioms about weather and seasons become meaningless. As two humanities drift apart, a fierce debate ignites about Mars itself. Should the red planet remain pristine, a monument to cosmic history, or be transformed into a second Earth? Terraformers argue humanity needs a backup planet, genetically unmodified humans who can walk both worlds. Preservationists counter that Mars's ancient landscapes deserve protection from human arrogance. Meanwhile, Earth receives an unexpected gift. The most polluting industries, heavy manufacturing, mining operations, chemical processing, relocate to Mars, where there's no biosphere to protect. Earth's skies begin clearing. Forests reclaim abandoned industrial zones. Oceans show early signs of recovery. Humanity hasn't learned sustainability. It's merely exported its destruction. The moral paradox becomes unavoidable. Is sacrificing one world to save another ethical? Are Martian colonists unwitting participants in planetary destruction, or pioneers bearing necessary burdens? These tensions reach breaking point in 2025. The Martian Colonial Assembly convenes an emergency session. After decades of Earth taxation without representation, they vote for independence. The declaration echoes Jefferson's words but adds new grievances: ecological exploitation, biological discrimination against Martian-born citizens, economic policies favoring Earth corporations over local enterprise. Earth's response is swift and furious. The United Nations condemns the declaration as illegal. Major powers threaten economic sanctions. Military planners dust off contingency plans never meant to be used. But how do you wage war across 225 million kilometers? Missiles would take months to arrive. Invasion fleets could be tracked for weeks. Traditional warfare becomes strategically absurd. Instead, new forms of conflict emerge. Earth threatens to halt supply shipments of complex electronics, medicines, and luxury goods. Mars counters by redirecting asteroid mining resources away from Earth markets. The standoff reveals an uncomfortable truth: the two worlds have become economically interdependent. Mars needs Earth's manufacturing sophistication. Earth has grown addicted to Martian rare minerals. Families find themselves divided by interplanetary borders. Communication delays of up to 20 minutes make real-time negotiation impossible. Diplomacy itself must be reinvented for cosmic distances. After 6 tense months, pragmatism prevails. The Mars Accords establish a transitional government, independence in domestic affairs, continued economic partnership with Earth. Humanity's first interplanetary treaty. The crisis passes, but nothing will be the same. Humanity has learned that expansion doesn't dissolve conflict, it merely extends the battlefield. Old patterns persist across new frontiers. Yet something profound has shifted. With 2 viable homeworlds, humanity's oldest fear begins dissolving. The existential terror of extinction, 1 asteroid, 1 pandemic, 1 nuclear war away, fades. This story of 2 worlds continues to unfold. If you're finding this journey thought-provoking, consider subscribing and liking this video. Now, let us explore what humanity becomes next. With survival ensured across 2 worlds, philosophers grapple with new questions. If humanity cannot die, what gives life meaning? Purpose shifts from mere continuation to flourishing. Religious institutions transform. Some declare Mars proof of divine providence, new Eden awaiting cultivation. Others warn of hubris, of Babel rebuilt among the stars. Faith adapts, as it always has. The definition of human becomes contentious. 3rd-generation Martians stand 2 meters tall with elongated limbs, their bones too fragile for Earth's gravity. Are they still us? Scientists confirm what many suspected: genetic drift has begun. Martian humans show adaptations to lower gravity, higher radiation. Evolution accelerates across the void between worlds. Art reflects this transformation. Martian poetry speaks of the weight of ancestry and gravity's memory. Earth artists romanticize their red cousins as humanity's bold next chapter. And now we step back from this vivid alternate history. We return to our own timeline, where Mars remains distant, expensive, nearly impossible to reach. But this thought experiment reveals something profound. The barriers to interplanetary civilization aren't purely technological. They're choices about funding, priorities, collective will, and imagination. Our alternate timeline shows humanity carrying its conflicts, inequalities, and prejudices to new frontiers. Escaping Earth doesn't mean escaping ourselves. We bring our nature wherever we go. Yet it also reveals our resilience. Given opportunity, humans adapt, build, create community. New challenges produce new solutions. Distance from Earth breeds not just independence, but innovation. The environmental paradox we explored cuts both ways. Exporting pollution to Mars is merely relocating problems. True solutions require transformation, not displacement. Perhaps the deepest lesson concerns identity itself. The Martians of our alternate timeline became something new, not through intention, but through circumstance. Evolution doesn't ask permission. In our actual timeline, we remain one humanity on one fragile world. This is both our vulnerability and our unity. Every human alive shares Earth as sole home. The question this alternate history poses is not whether we should reach Mars, but whether we're ready. Have we learned enough from Earth's mistakes to avoid repeating them? Some argue we must expand to survive, that eggs belong in multiple baskets. Others insist we must first prove we can sustain one world before attempting two. Perhaps both are right. Perhaps the discipline required to reach Mars, global cooperation, long-term thinking, massive investment in science, is exactly what Earth itself needs. In our alternate timeline, the breakthrough came from fusion propulsion and radiation shielding. In our reality, the breakthrough may need to come from within ourselves. Technology alone cannot save us. As our thought experiment shows, even with buses to Mars, humanity remains beautifully and tragically human, capable of both greatness and folly. The red planet waits, as it always has, patient and indifferent. Whether we reach it in decades or centuries, Mars will still be there, cold, beautiful, full of terrible promise. And perhaps that is the final lesson. The universe offers infinite frontiers, but provides no escape from ourselves. We carry our humanity everywhere, burden and blessing both. What if we could travel to Mars like taking a bus? We would still be us, hopeful, flawed, reaching ever outward. Perhaps that reaching itself is what makes us human.